Hello YouTube and welcome to the next route learning video. On today's video we're taking another return journey, much like we did with the Riviera line a couple of weeks ago. And so we're going to be driving train 1 Foxtrot 54, which is the 1825 London St Pancras International to Broadstairs service, and we will be driving that along the London to Faversham route as far as Faversham, which is a distance of just over 51 miles. The scenario comes from an Armstrong Powerhouse scenario pack, which I believe is the London to Faversham Modern Pack, and is called Evening Rush Part 3. Along the way, we will be calling at Stratford International, Ebbsfleet International, Rochester, Chatham, Gillingham, Rainham, Sittingbourne and finally Faversham, and I do have one notice in the description of this scenario that we will have a temporary speed restriction of 50 miles per hour at some point between Sittingbourne and Tainham. Our attraction for the journey today, a Southeastern Class 395, has been in service since the 29th of June 2009 and was manufactured by Hitachi at Kasado Factory in Japan. The total of 29 Class 395s were built with 6 coaches per train, and there are a total of 340 seats with 12 tip-up seats, which are, I believe, in disabled areas. The total length of each 6-coach train is 398 feet, or 121 metres. And the maximum power output is 16 210 kilowatt traction motors on board this train. The total weight of each unit is 265 tonnes, and it is a dual voltage electric multiple unit, which means that it does operate on both the 25 kilovolt AC overhead electric system of the high speed line, as well as the 750 volt DC electrification system of the more conventional third rail routes, and we will actually need to swap power modes once we get to Ebbsfleet International, and indeed I will demonstrate how to do that. Apart from being just fitted with the conventional signalling system equipment such as AWS and TPWS, the Class 395 is also equipped with the TVM 430 signalling system, which I will mention a little bit more as we travel through this journey. The maximum speed of these trains is 140 miles per hour when running under the overhead system and 100 miles per hour when running on the third rail system, although these trains do have a maximum speed record of 157 miles per hour. Once in the cab of the Class 395, normally there's a little bit that you need to do to set up. However, in this particular scenario, the train is already set up with the correct power mode. So all we actually need to do is just put the reversing handle into the forward position and then reset the AWS self-test sequence. So just so you can see the controls here, and as I move the reversing handle now, technically I should move it into neutral first in reality, but in this case I'm going to put it in forward because that's all it will let me do. And as you can hear, the AWS has just gone off, so I've just reset that. Up here you can see a red light that says CTRL below it. That is indicating that we are set up on the correct power mode for the Chatham Tunnel rail link. Just to the right of the reversing handle there is the power handle. And indeed you can see that there are 4 steps of power, and then we have braking below that, so it is a combined traction and brake controller. And indeed, as I move the power handle there, the brakes are releasing to the minimum position. And then if you move it to the next position there, it's idle, and then 4 steps of power. Unlike many units, the brakes on this particular unit are not stepped and they are smooth, which gives me a much more precise control of the brake force which you'd like to use. Up here we have the digital speedometer, and indeed you can see that it currently says kph, and as we move that number will rise. When you are set up on the Chatham Tunnel rail link system, the speedometer always displays the speed in kilometers per hour, and when on the third rail system the kph there will change to mph, and it will be measuring the speed in miles per hour. That being said, as we depart from St Pancras, the initial speed limit boards that we see are actually giving us the speed in miles per hour, so you need to be able to just do a quick conversion to know how fast you're allowed to travel, and I will go through that as we depart from St Pancras. Just to the right of the speedometer there we have one of the brake gauges. Indeed, that is showing us how hard the brakes are applied. And also just there you can see a gauge which has a percentage on it, and as I apply the brakes more you can see that needle climbing. What I try to do is not go above just around the start of the red line, so 80% there would be the absolute maximum brake force that I will try and use on this journey today. The next thing that I need to do now is set up the headlights, so I've just pressed H twice and that should have set the headlights into the correct position for daylight travel. One final thing to point out is that on the speedometer you can see a red line there next to the 0 on the right hand side. When the train is accelerating, that line will turn to a small arrow and you'll see it pointing upwards, indicating that we are gaining speed. And if we're slowing down, the arrow will point downwards, indicating that we are slowing down, and that is a very useful feature, especially when driving without the HUD, to give you an idea of what power settings you need to use to try and maintain speed. Now that we've gone through the basic cab controls, I think it's pretty much time to depart. Departing London St Pancras, the starting speed limit is 25 miles per hour, which is around 40 kilometers per hour, and we've got around 5 3/4 miles to go to our first stop, which is Stratford International. So as we now approach 40 kilometers per hour, I'm just cutting the power back to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. As you notice there, the arrow has just changed from an up to down and now back to up again, indicating that we are accelerating. We are on an uphill gradient at this point of 1 in 65, so we do need to bear that in mind, and I'm now in step 1 of power. And in fact, we're still losing a little bit of speed, so I'm just going to increase that to step 2 of power now. The speed limit here is now about to go up to 40 miles per hour, which is actually around 64 kilometers per hour. However, when we enter London Tunnel number 1, which we will be approaching soon, and the TVM signalling system comes on which dictates our speed, the maximum speed that it will allow us to travel at is 60 kilometers per hour, so that's the speed I'm aiming to accelerate to. Now that you can see the gradient's changed and we've stopped going downhill there, we were going downhill on a 1 in 40 down gradient, and we're now going uphill. At that point you can then be sure that the rear of the train has passed the speed board, and we can accelerate up towards 40 miles per hour. As I said, I am going to stop accelerating at 60 kilometers per hour, which is around 37.5 miles per hour. Now we've stopped going uphill once again and we're just about to start going downhill. In fact, we've just gone slightly over the speed which I planned, so I'm just applying the brakes there, ready for the TVM system coming on. As you can see, it has now popped up with a 060, meaning we're permitted to travel at up to 60 kilometers per hour. And now it's changed to 225, so we can now accelerate immediately up towards 225 kilometers per hour. I've gone straight into full power at this point, and the downhill gradient entering the tunnel of around 1 in 40 is aiding in our acceleration. As you can see, we're already up to 100 kilometers per hour, which is over 60 miles per hour, and we're going to continue to accelerate. We should be able to get to around 200 kilometers per hour, or 125 miles per hour, before we have to start slowing down for our stop at Stratford. So we're now in London Tunnel number 1, which is around 7.5 kilometres long, and Stratford International Station is just pretty much straight at the other end of this tunnel. Just after Stratford we'll then be going into a second tunnel, London Tunnel number 2, which is around 10 kilometres long, and we'll be in that for, well, probably about a quarter of the way from Stratford to Ebbsfleet. So with the TVM system, it's a fully in-cab signalling system, and what you need to look out for are track markers, which are square shaped with a sort of triangle on them. We just passed one there with a yellow triangle and a blue outline. They are what the signals would be, and at each one we can get a radio signal to the train telling us what we need to do. As you can see, the 225 is now flashing, indicating that we need to be prepared for a new speed restriction to be given to us at the next trackside marker. And indeed, you can now see we've been given a new speed limit of 200 kilometers per hour. But because it's flashing instead of solid, it means that after the next marker we can expect a further speed reduction. And what you need to do is you need to slow down before that next marker. So as you can see here, it's now dropped to 170, so I now need to slow down to 170 kilometers per hour before we pass the next triangular marker. So I've applied the brakes, ready to slow down, and as we reach 170, I'm now releasing the brakes. I'm just going to allow the train to coast until we're given our next speed restriction. It's now dropped to 160 kilometers per hour, which isn't a huge drop, and that's around 100 miles per hour. So I've just slowed down to that, and once again I've now released the brakes. I'm just going to allow the train to coast along at this point until we pass the next marker and see what the next speed limit is going to be. As we come towards the end of this tunnel, we will have an uphill section which will aid in our deceleration. So as you can see, we've now been given a new speed restriction to slow down to by the next marker of 100 kilometers per hour. So I'm slowing down for that now. I'm not sure exactly where the marker's going to be. I do know it will be close to the end of the tunnel, and we should be coming up on it very shortly. Under the TVM signalling system, if you do speed, I believe it's more than around 10 to 15 kilometers above the speed restriction, the emergency brakes will be applied. So you will receive a penalty brake application. We've now been ordered to slow down to 80 kilometers per hour, so we're now below that. You can see we're now entering the platform here at Stratford International. We're going up at 1 in 40 as we enter the platform. And I'm now just reducing the braking a bit, just as I feel we're going to stop slightly too early. What we need to do is we need to aim to stop by the 6-car stop sign, which is in a shelter near the other end of the platform. Just releasing the brakes momentarily as I felt that we were slowing down just a bit too early there. And you can see the 6-car stop marker is just coming up on the right hand side there. Departing from Stratford International, the starting speed limit is 80 kilometers per hour, as you can see on the TVM display there. And we've got just over 16 3/4 miles to go to the next stop, where we end our run along the high speed section, which is Ebbsfleet International. As you can see, the speed limit has now jumped up to 100 kilometers per hour, so I'm accelerating towards that now. And in a moment, just as we enter this tunnel, it will then be jumping up. In fact, just before we enter the tunnel, you can see there, it's now jumped up to 225 kilometers per hour, or 140 miles per hour. And that won't change until we're within about 3 to 4 miles of Ebbsfleet. So we've now entered London Tunnel number 2, which is 10 kilometers long. As many of you may be aware, but some of you may not, this is actually the route that we're on at the moment until Ebbsfleet is known as High Speed 1. It was opened in stages between, I think, the early to mid 2000s. And it actually links up to the Chatham Tunnel near Dover. And the whole route is just under 70 miles long between Dover and London St Pancras. Before this route existed, trains coming through the Chatham Tunnel had to cross onto the conventional lines and run at a maximum speed of 90 miles per hour all of the way to London. And at the time they went into London Waterloo rather than London St Pancras, which I believe it was the year 2006 or 7 when St Pancras International was finally opened as the international terminal for Eurostar services. Unfortunately, in Train Simulator we don't have any Eurostar trains, therefore we won't see any as AI on this journey. One thing that I do wish is that when making this route, Dovetail Games had extended it more. The high-speed section for domestic services, such as what we're driving here, actually extends down to Ashford International, which is another 30 miles roughly of high-speed running. I just feel that that would have been better when this route was marketed as a high-speed route. In fact, the route from, say, St Pancras International to Dover, I feel would have been a much more interesting route to drive than St Pancras to Faversham. As you can see, we are now getting close to 225 kilometers per hour. Once we reach that speed, I need to go between steps 1 and 2 power to try and maintain speed. And unfortunately I can't actually see what power setting we're using, so I'm having to go by the arrow on the speedometer. So step 2 power will cause the arrow to be pointing upwards because we will be accelerating slightly. And then just as we hit 225 in a moment, I will drop to step 1 power, which I'm doing now. And as you can see, the arrow is now pointing downwards, indicating that we're slowing down. This train does not have cruise control implemented. I wish it did, because it would certainly help with the driving. I don't know if it's there in real life or not, but it's certainly not been implemented in game. So the target speed is to try and keep us between 222 and 225 kilometers per hour. In a moment we will be departing from this tunnel, and we're going to have a steep uphill climb at around 1 in 40. I believe it's just coming up now. You can see there's a big gradient change just here. So at this point I'm going straight up to full power, because the train is going to continue to slow down regardless of the power setting that I'm using. You can see now that I'm in full power and the arrow is still pointing downwards. However, the gradient is quickly leveling out just here. So now at this point I need to reduce the power to try and ensure that we don't break the speed limit. Now that we've come out of London Tunnel number 2, we're now running alongside a conventional route on the left hand side, which is actually the route between London Fenchurch Street and Tilbury, Southend and Shoeburyness. It's a line I have travelled on in real life, though not for many years. Indeed, when I travelled on it, I believe it was still being operated by old Mark I slam door electric multiple units such as the Class 310 and 312. In fact, that is a route I would like to personally see modelled in Train Simulator. It's a self-contained route, it's only around 40 miles long, and I just think it would be quite an interesting route to be able to drive. I feel it's also of a length that Dovetail Games might actually be prepared to give us the full route for a change, because as we know they're certainly not well known for giving us long journeys on their add-ons. In fact, we've just gone slightly over the speed limit there. I've just had to cut the power back and apply a little bit of braking. It was only 1 kilometre over the speed limit, so thankfully I don't think that was too important. Certainly it's not enough to cause any sort of a penalty brake application. So as I was talking about the Southend Shoeburyness railway line next to us there, it is operated today by Class 357 electric multiple units, which have the look of a Turbostar Class 170, but the electric motors, I believe, of an Electrostar, such as the Class 375 or 377. I'm just having a couple of problems along here trying to know what setting I've got the power handle in, so please do excuse me. I'm just trying to focus on trying to get it right so that we don't break the speed limit at any point. As you can see, the gradients along here are quite up and down. In fact, they're up and down so frequently I couldn't write them all down. But suffice to say, you do have to keep a close eye on your speed versus the gradient that you're currently on to try and maintain a speed as close to the target as possible. As you can see, the TVM system is now flashing at me 225, which means that we do need to expect to slow down. Indeed, we're now approaching the next marker. You can see we're passing it, and we've now been given a 200 km/h speed restriction to slow down to. So I've had to make an immediate brake application, as we're now starting to go downhill very steeply. Unfortunately, I can't balance the brake needle there on the red line. It's either too much or too little, so it's probably best to do slightly too much there, because of the downhill gradient that we're currently on affecting our ability to slow down. In fact, I'm continuing to slow down beyond 200 km/h, just because in a moment there will be a reduction, as you can see now, to 170, and I want to ensure that we have slowed down to that in time, due to the downhill gradient making it more difficult for us to brake. So now that we've reached around 170 kilometers per hour, I'm just reducing the braking. As you can see, the gradient is now changing. We're about to start going uphill, and we've been given a new 100 kilometer per hour speed limit to slow down to at the next marker. I'm just applying the brakes once again to try and bring our speed down to 100 kilometers per hour. I think we're possibly slowing down slightly too quick, so I am just going to release the braking at this point. Well, not release, but reduce the braking. In fact, I'm now going to idle the power completely and allow the train to coast, unless I can see the next track marker just coming up. As you can see, we're now passing the marker and the speed limit. We're now doing below 100 kilometers per hour. In fact, we can maintain 100 for a moment now, so I'm just going to give us a little bit of power. Once we pass the next marker, we're then going to be given another speed reduction down to 80 kilometers per hour. So I'm now cutting the power, and I'm just going to apply some braking just to ensure that we do slow down in time. We're about to go on a leveler gradient for a moment, and then we're going to go uphill once again as we head towards the platform at Ebbsfleet. Ebbsfleet International has actually higher level and lower level platforms, so we're taking the higher level platforms. The higher level platforms are only used for trains heading in the Faversham direction, whereas the lower level platforms are used by trains heading towards Ashford International, and also Eurostar services to France and Belgium. As you can see, we are climbing at this point, and the platform here at Ebbsfleet is just coming up. I've just reduced the braking completely as the uphill gradient is helping us to slow down. In fact, I feel we're slowing down possibly a little too quick, so I've just given us a small amount of power to bring our speed back up. As you can see, we've now got a conventional speed board indicating 60 miles per hour. The 3 zeros with the red markers that you saw on the TVM system there indicated a stop marker, so indeed if we weren't actually reaching the end of the system as we are here, that would mean that we would have to stop at the next trackside marker. Don't worry if you didn't get everything about the TVM system. I am going to cover it in the upcoming UK signalling tutorial, which I'm hoping to make within the next couple of weeks. As you can see, we're now stopping by the 6-car stop sign, and in a moment I'm going to have to change power mode, so I'm just going to open the doors now and just do a very quick power mode change. So what we have to do now is you have to press the DC button to change over. You then need to press the button below that says pan up, shoes down. Press that once. And now you can see there's a white light come on here that says line vault. That was out a moment ago. And so we need to press the pan up, shoes down button a second time. And then the MCB VCB light, which is below the line vault light there, will then go out. And that will indicate that the power mode has now changed. So we are now drawing power from the 750 volt DC third rail system. Indeed, you can see on the speedometer there that it's now changed to miles per hour from kilometers per hour. Departing Ebbsfleet International, the first thing that you should do actually before you start moving is just check the signal at the end of the platform is clear. And indeed you can see that we have a green signal there. The starting speed limit is 60 miles per hour, and we've got just over 10.25 miles to go to the next stop, which unusually is Rochester, as most trains travelling along this route stop at Gravesend and Strood between here and Rochester, but this service is scheduled to run non-stop all of the way to Rochester. As we reach 40 miles per hour, I'm now going to idle the power and allow the train to coast. Now, the reason for this is that even though the speed limit is 60 miles per hour, the point coming up in a moment where we join the main line just seems far too sharp for a 60 mile per hour speed limit. So I feel that either Dovetail Games have put the point too sharp, or they've got the speed limit wrong, but one way or the other, there is no way that on a point this sharp in real life, you would take it at 60 miles per hour. So I allowed the train to coast so that we ultimately take the point at 30 instead. Now that we're joining the main line here, the speed limit is actually going up to 70 miles per hour. And so just after we passed this overbridge here, I'm now going to apply full power and bring our speed up towards 70. Though as we get to around 70 miles per hour, we need to think about braking almost straight away to slow down, as there is a 30 mile per hour speed restriction through Gravesend Station. The upcoming 30 speed restriction has no warning boards, no morpeth boards or anything, so you just have to know it's there and know the correct point to brake. So what I'm going to do is, as we reach this underbridge here and we're doing 60 miles per hour, I'm now going to bring the power to idle and just coast for a moment, and shortly after rounding this curve, I'm now going to apply the brakes to slow us down towards 30. In fact, we are slowing down just slightly too early for a moment, so I've just released the brakes completely. I'm just going to allow the train to coast, and then I'm going to reapply the brakes. I think it's just after this underbridge, sorry, not underbridge, after this overbridge here. You can now see just by the next signal there, the 30 mile per hour speed board is just coming up. So I'm just bringing our speed down towards that now. Now that we're doing 30 miles per hour, I'm just going to allow the train to coast. If we lose too much speed, I will apply one step of power, but I don't think we'll need to at this point. I will only do that if we get to below 27 miles per hour. We're now passing Gravesend Station. I'm just going to give us a notch of power at this point, just as we did slow down to 27 there. I'll then cut it back as we reach 30. I have now idled the power once again. The speed limit in a moment will in fact be going back up to 70 miles per hour, but for some reason very quickly after that it's dropping back to 50, so we won't be able to accelerate to 70 before the speed limit drops again. I'm going to accelerate for the 70 speed restriction just as we reach this third overbridge just coming up now. So I'm now going into full power to accelerate, well I say up towards 70, but really up towards 50, as we will be very shortly passing the 50 mile per hour speed board, though in a short distance after that the speed limit will then be going back up once again to 70 miles per hour. As you can see, we're now passing the 70 mile per hour speed board, and I'm going to accelerate towards 70 just as we enter this right hand curve here. So we have now entered the right hand curve, and I'm now going into full power to bring us up towards 70 miles per hour. Once we reach 70, I'm then going to idle the power, and we need to go between idle and step 1 power to try and maintain the speed. So as before, I'm just going to aim for a target speed of roughly 68 to 70 miles per hour and adjust the power to try and keep us within that sort of range. One thing to point out at this point, we just passed the whistle board and I sounded the horn. I think most people don't actually realise that the class 395 that was given to us with this route does in fact have a 2-tone horn rather than a single tone. But unlike usual where you would use the spacebar and B key, B on this particular train actually opens the front hood, which would allow 2 units to connect together. So what you have to do is you have to press shift and space to get the other horn sound, the other tone. We're now passing one of the staff platforms at Hoo Junction, and indeed you can see a yard here which I believe is just called Hoo Junction Yard. I have previously done a video where we drove a Class 33 from here all of the way to Faversham on a freight run. It's possibly one of the slowest journeys I've done, mainly because most of the wagons were unfitted, and indeed it made the brakes very bad indeed. And when you needed to slow down, you needed to apply all of your brakes at once as hard as possible to have any hope of slowing down at the right place. But if you are interested in seeing that, then you can find it on this channel. Just look up UK Freight 1, which is Hoo Junction to Faversham in a Class 33. We're now passing through Higham station, and we're just about to enter the first of two long tunnels, and we're about to have a Morpeth board warning for an upcoming drop in the speed limit down to 15 miles per hour. However, this speed limit drop isn't until the end of the second tunnel, which is still around 3 to 4 miles away, I believe, so we're actually given that speed limit warning very early indeed. I can't remember what the names of these two tunnels are off the top of my head, but I am going to caption the names and lengths of all tunnels in this video, so you will be able to see it in the finished product. So we're now leaving the first tunnel and entering the second tunnel, and as you can see we've got a reminder there for the upcoming 15 mile per hour speed restriction. We still don't need to brake quite yet, however. So what I'm looking for now is there is a signal in this second tunnel. Just after that signal, I'm then going to start thinking about braking for the 15 mile per hour speed limit. The 15 limit does come into force once we reach the end of this tunnel, almost immediately as we exit. So as you can see, we're now reaching the signal which I mentioned, so I'm going to start applying the brakes now. And I can't actually see very well how hard the brakes are applied at this point. Now I can see the brake gauge a bit better. I can see I did apply them slightly too hard there. Now speed is coming down quite nicely. In fact, I'm just reducing the braking a bit to try and ensure that we don't slow down too quick. I'm going to release the brakes completely just for a moment until we get closer to the end of the tunnel, and then reapply them to bring us down towards 15. So now on leaving the tunnel, the speed limit has just dropped to 15 miles per hour, and I'm just going to go between idle and step 1 of power to try and maintain us at this speed. As we round this curve, you can now see the platforms at Strood station just coming up. We are going uphill at this point through the station, which is affecting our speed a little, so it's actually making it more difficult to balance our speed out. We do need to pay attention just here now that we have a single yellow signal, which means that the signal guarding Rochester Bridge Junction, where we will join the Chatham main line, which goes over the overbridge you can see just ahead of us, is actually at displaying a red aspect. At this point we're about to start going uphill on a 1 in 41 uphill gradient, and as you probably noticed, we've just passed a 20 mph speed board. With the 1 in 41 uphill gradient, with no power, the train would slow down extremely quickly, but we do have to try and balance it out so that we can stop as close to the signal as we can on this gradient, and must remember when starting moving again that we're on an uphill gradient and to try and not allow the train to roll back. So I'm not actually using any braking here, I'm just allowing the train to really coast down. So I am going to apply the brakes there just for a second. I wanted to make sure I didn't feel we were slowing down quite quick enough. Let's give a small amount of power. As we reach around 1 mph here, we're now applying the brakes to ensure there is no rollback. Departing from this signal here, I have just applied power into, I think it was step 2 initially, just to try and ensure that there was no rollback, because I don't feel that step 1 power would have done enough to allow us to accelerate without rolling back. The starting speed limit here is now 20 mph, so that's the speed that I'm aiming to be travelling at. I believe that just here we are now about to cross the River Medway on this bridge. I can't remember the name of the bridge off the top of my head, but again I will try and find that out and put it in a caption on this video. I do have to bear in mind that we did just depart on a single yellow signal, so I have to drive with extreme caution until we can see what the aspect of the next signal is. Indeed, you can see we do have a red signal there, so I am preparing to stop. In fact, it's just changed to a single yellow. If this signal is displaying a single yellow aspect, that means that we are cleared into the platform at Rochester. And indeed, just after we joined the main line, the speed limit went up to 30 mph, so that is the speed limit that I can now accelerate to. And the speed limit won't go above 30 mph until after we've passed through Chatham, which is the stop after Rochester. So I'm just going between idle and step 1 power once again to try and maintain the speed and ensure we don't slow down or speed up too much. Just as we round this left-hand curve, in a moment we will be seeing the platforms at Rochester. Indeed, you can see them coming up now. So at this point I'm not going to give the train any power, I'm just going to allow us to coast for a moment. Here at Rochester we do need to stop, I believe, at the end of the platform. Departing from Rochester, the starting speed limit is 30 mph, and we've got just over half a mile to go to the next stop, which is Chatham. Indeed, there are no speed changes between here and Chatham, it's just a case of getting up to 30, trying to maintain that, and we're about to go through a tunnel in a moment, and straight at the other end of the tunnel is Chatham Station. So Rochester and Chatham Station are very close together. At this point I'm now going between idle and step 1 power just to try and maintain us at around 30 miles per hour. And you can already see the station at Chatham just coming up ahead. I'm now applying the brakes to stop, and we need to aim to stop at the 6-car stop sign, which is around the area of the bridge, which is just coming up in a moment. So not quite here at this first bridge, just slightly beyond it, and we should see the 6-car stop sign. There it is, just nestled into the side there. In fact, I'm coming in slightly too quick. I'm probably going to stop slightly beyond it there, and I also brake slightly too hard, but reduce the braking ready for stopping. Departing Chatham, the starting speed limit is 30 miles per hour, and we have around 1 2/3 of a mile to go to the next stop, which is Gillingham. Once again, as we reach 30 miles per hour, I'm going to cut back on the power to idle, and just go between idle and step 1 power to try and maintain our speed. In a moment the speed limit will be increasing to 50 miles per hour. As you can see, we're just passing the board now. So I'm just going to stay at 30 for a moment until the rear of the train has passed the board. And I can be sure it has as we reach this grey box that you can see just coming up on the left now. So I've now gone up to full power to accelerate up towards 50 miles per hour. And in a moment the speed limit will be going up further to 60 miles per hour. I have just cut back on the power to ensure that we don't break the speed limit, and as you can see we've now reached the 60 mile per hour speed limit, so in a moment I'm going to give us full power. There's no actual marker as such as where we can accelerate, it's just more a bit of guesswork as we enter the tunnel at this point. Just as we reach the end of this tunnel we then need to start thinking about braking for Gillingham station. So I am now going to idle the power now that we've reached 60 miles per hour. And just as we hit this AWS ramp, I'm now applying the brakes, ready to stop at Gillingham. Here at Gillingham I could not see a clear 6-car stop sign, so it's actually a bit of guesswork as to the exact position to stop. And so I'm aiming to stop just somewhere around here. As I said, it's a bit of guesswork. By this last building is the place that I stopped the other day, as it looked about right. Departing Gillingham, the starting speed limit is 60 miles per hour, and we've got around 3 miles to go to the next stop, which is Rainham. As we reach 60 miles per hour, I'm once again going to idle the power and go between idle and step 1 to try and maintain our speed. Coming up on the right hand side here, what we're passing on the right hand side here now is Gillingham Depot. In a moment the speed limit will be going up to 90 miles per hour, and it will be at 90 all of the way to Rainham, and we may just about be able to get to 90 before we have to start thinking about slowing down. So we've just passed the 90 mile per hour speed board, and now the AWS has sounded for the signal just coming up. I can now accelerate to 90 miles per hour. At this point we've now got around 2 miles to go to Rainham, and at the next signal I'm going to idle the power, and at that point we will have around 1¼ miles to go to our stop. So we've now reached the next signal. As I mentioned, we've got around 1¼ miles to go at this point. Just accidentally applied the brakes slightly there. And what I'm going to do now is look out for the following signal. And at this signal you can now see just coming up as we pass it, I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop at Rainham. You can now see the platforms at Rainham Station coming up just ahead. I think we're slowing down roughly on target. I don't want to enter the platform at faster than around 30 miles per hour. That was slowed down just slightly too quick, so I'm just reducing the braking slightly now. Just until we get into the platform. In fact, I'm going to release the brakes completely just for a few seconds. Now I'm going to reapply the brakes at this point. Here at Rainham we do need to stop at the 6-car stop sign, which is almost at the end of the platform. On departure from Rainham, the reason why I sounded the horn is because there is a level crossing just after the platform, and I know that drivers often do that in reality. The starting speed limit here is 80 miles per hour. In fact, the speed limit dropped to 80 just at the end of the platform, as you may have noticed there. And we've got just under 6 miles to go to the next stop, which is Sittingbourne. The speed limit's now going to remain at 80 miles per hour for around 3 miles until we pass through the next station, which we won't be stopping at, which is Newington Station. Just after Newington Station, the speed limit will then be dropping down to 70 miles per hour. And at this point we've now got the start of a 4-track section, which is around 2 miles long. The other end of the 4-track section is again just after Newington Station, so once we go back into double track, at that point the speed limit will then be dropping to 70 miles per hour. I am now reducing the power at this point at 80 miles per hour. We need to go between idle and step 1 power to try and maintain our speed. We are going uphill slightly more for a moment, so I've just had to increase the power a bit more to try and ensure that we don't lose too much speed. Though in a moment, as I mentioned, the speed limit will be dropping to 70 miles per hour. You can now see the platforms at Newington Station just coming up. So I'm just applying a small amount of light braking here just to ensure that we have slowed down to 70 miles per hour in time. We have now entered the 70 mile per hour speed restriction. We are going to be going uphill in a moment, so I've just given us a step 1 of power at this point. I've had to cut it back for a second just to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. We're about to be going up a lot steeper, as you just probably noticed another gradient change there. And at this point we're going up at around 1 in 130. In a short distance the gradient will be levelling, and then just after that we will start going downhill on a gradient of 1 in 120, and at that point I'm just going to idle the power to try and ensure that we don't gain too much speed, and then shortly after that the speed limit will be going up to 80 miles per hour once again. So at this point we're now starting to go downhill on the 1 in 120 down gradient, which I mentioned a moment ago, and we're just passing the 80 mile per hour speed board at this point. So I am now going to bring our speed up towards 80 miles per hour using not full power. I believe we're possibly on step 3 power at this point. We can ignore the Morpeth board warning that we've just had, as that is for trains turning off onto the Sheerness branch rather than trains taking the main route. And indeed, if you haven't seen them before, I have covered the Sheerness branch in both directions. In one direction was in a class 423, and in the other direction was a class 465, and they are some of the earliest videos which I made for Train Simulator on this channel all the way back in November. So we're now crossing the junction with the Sheerness branch diverging to the left. The line from Sheerness will join us in a moment also from the left in a triangle. And we need to brake for Sittingbourne just after this overbridge, so now we've just passed under the overbridge there. I'm now going to start applying the brakes, ready to stop at Sittingbourne Station. The junction that we've just crossed is the other end of the triangle with the route from Sheerness joining. What I am looking out for now is the 6-car stop sign, which I believe is just around the area of the first billboard, which you can see there. I think it's just after the billboard actually. So I'm just keeping an eye out for that now. You can see it just after the shelter there. We've got the 6 and 8-car stop sign. Departing from Sittingbourne, the starting speed limit is 80 miles per hour, and we have around 7¼ miles to go to our next and final stop, which is Faversham. As I mentioned at the start of this video, we did have a notice that there will be a temporary speed restriction of 50 miles per hour along this section, and so indeed what we're going to be looking out for is the warning board for that. It will be between here and the next station, which is the only station between here and Faversham, which is Tainham. For now, I'm going to continue to accelerate up to 80 miles per hour until we see the warning board for the reduction to 50, at which point I will brake straight away. I am now reducing the power as we're approaching 80 miles per hour, so I just want to ensure that we don't break the speed limit at this point. I have now idled the power. As you can see, the arrow is now pointing down rather than up. And we just need to go between idle and step 1 along here to roughly maintain us at around 80 miles per hour. We now have the TSR warning for the upcoming 50 speed limits, so I'm now applying the brakes already to ensure that we do slow down in time. You saw there was a yellow board there. There was also a temporary AWS warning which warned us of the upcoming limit. I'm not slowing down quite quick enough, so I've just had to apply the brakes harder than I normally would. In fact, I slowed down slightly too early in the end. I thought that I saw the actual board for the 50 limit was closer than it is. So we have now entered the 50 mile per hour temporary speed restriction zone, and we just need to go between idle and step 1 of power at this point to try and maintain our speed. So yeah, we didn't actually need to slow down quite as hard as I originally thought just there. As you can see, we're now passing another yellow board with a T on it. I believe the T stands for termination, and it means that we have reached the end of the 50 mile per hour temporary speed restriction. But like with all speed limits in the UK, we have to be sure that the rear of the train has passed the speed board before we can accelerate. As you can see, as we now pass through Higham station, the speed limit has temporarily dropped to 75 miles per hour, though it will shortly be going up to 80. I believe this is the 80 board just coming up now. And it will go up in steps of 5 miles per hour at this point, up to 90 miles per hour. I have just cut back on our power settings to try and ensure that we're not accelerating too quickly and we won't exceed the 80 mile per hour speed limit. As you can see, the speed limit is now going up to 85, so I'm just giving us a little more power so that we can accelerate up towards that. And then the next thing that I'm looking out for now is the 90 mile per hour speed board coming up. That is 1¼ miles from a speed reduction back down to 75 miles per hour. We're now passing the 90 mile per hour speed board, which, as I said, is around 1¾ miles. A correction, I will get this right in a second. 1¼ miles from an upcoming 75 speed limit. We're currently going up at 1 in 132, though that will change to going down at 1 in 120 very shortly. We're now passing the warning board for the 75 limit, which is around 3/4 mile from the limit itself. I applied the brakes slightly harder there than I planned. I hadn't realised just how hard I'd applied them. I was just braking there for the upcoming 75 limit, which comes into force, I believe, by this signal just here. We're now around 3/4 mile from an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed limit, so I am just going to allow the train to continue to coast. Indeed, we now have the Morpeth board warning for the 60 limit. which is just over half a mile from the limit itself, and at this point we're going down 1 in 100 for a brief moment before the gradient levels out a bit more. So I'm just going to apply the brakes a bit harder now and just ensure that we have slowed down to 60 in time. So we have now slowed down to 60 miles per hour, and we're just over half a mile now from Faversham station itself. So I'm just going to apply the brakes just as we reach this small underbridge that you see just there that we've just crossed, just to ensure that we do slow down in time. You can now see the platform coming up at Faversham station. So I'm looking out now for the 6-car stop sign, which is around the area of the end of the roof here. In fact, I believe you can see it just coming up on the left there. In fact, I think we might just slightly overshoot it. I'm hoping we don't. We have done, but we haven't overshot it by too much. So here we are, arrival at Faversham. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you've enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share if you have enjoyed this video. Also, please don't forget that you can find me on Facebook for the latest updates. The link of that is in the description of this video. And in addition to that, if you do value the work that I do and would like to sponsor me towards the cost of new DLC or equipment, then please do visit my Patreon page for further information. Again, the link for that is in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.